It all begins in a house where a family is doing some kind of ritual that would allow them to communicate with demons. The man cuts his thumb and presses it against a book. The candle suddenly lights up, and the woman points at something. It indicates that something demonic is present with them. They all start to look at what the woman is pointing to, but they get distracted by a boy falling on the ground. It seems like he's having a seizure. The mother is desperate and terrified for her son's life. She yells at something to take her instead of her son. As the woman turns around, she is taken under the control of something demonic and walks toward the man. She stabs him twice until he falls to the ground. After a while, the boy wakes up. The page with the thumb impression is no longer there. As he stands up, he finds his parents dead. He freaks out, gets agitated, and runs away. Sometime later in the same house, another family, consisting of Donald and Wendy, are moving in. Their niece, Jami, and their son, Charlie, are there to help them. Jami continues to stare at a vintage-looking phone awkwardly. Wendy tells her that it belongs to the previous owners, but it doesn't work. Later, she takes some stuff upstairs and started to examine the place. The room appears excellent to her. Donald and Charlie are talking to each other in the basement when suddenly they hear Jami screaming upstairs. She is constantly banging and asking for help. As they reach upstairs, they find her locked inside the closet. Upon checking, they realize that the door of the closet had no lock. Jami just panicked and nothing else. Later, the kids leave to go to their place. Donald and Wendy start to set up their home. Wendy goes down to the basement to check the stuff the previous owners have left. She looks around and the basement seems like a mess. She opens one of the cartons with a blade, but mistakenly slashes her hand. Blood starts to pour out and drops on the same strange book. She brings the book upstairs and tries to decipher what is written in it. It's written in Latin, and she tries to scan it. Suddenly, she hears scratching sounds on the walls. However, Donald doesn't hear a thing. She keeps looking around, but doesn't hear the sounds anymore. Donald leaves to get some sleep, while Wendy stays behind to decipher the text in the book. She keeps hearing the sounds in the walls and tries to follow them. Suddenly, she hears a loud bang from behind. She moves toward the sound, and the sound grows louder and louder, like someone is trying to break open the walls. The sound begins to move around, and it stops behind a family photo frame. The frame drops to the floor with a loud bang, and it felt as if Wendy's heart stopped beating for a minute. She's feeling terrified and wonders if this is an indication of something terrible that's about to come. The following day, she drinks coffee, but still feels lazy. She is still baffled about her encounter from last night. To distract herself, she cooks breakfast, but doesn't crave to eat it. She opens the bin to throw her breakfast and finds their picture in the trash. She throws her breakfast and quietly leaves the kitchen. No matter what she does, her mind is still stuck on that book. She leaves everything and occupies herself with the book. She looks at her hand, and mysteriously, her wound has healed. She suddenly feels like being choked, and she gasps for air. Unexpectedly, she closes her eyes and draws something on the paper. She seems possessed. Nancy, Wendy's assistant, visits to discuss some official work. Wendy expresses her exhaustion, to which Nancy blames it on the shifting. Later, Donald finds the paper Wendy drew. The diary is placed beside it. He is about to open it, but a loud thud distracts him. He walks away to check it out, but finds nothing. He then enters the kitchen and finds Wendy standing still, facing the stairs to the basement, and speaking in a foreign language. Donald calls her, and when she turns around, she seems puzzled. She wonders why she hasn't cooked yet. Donald checks and reassures her that she's having a fever. He asks to stay still as he goes to get the medicines. She puts the mince inside the pan and turns on the stove. She raises her hand above the pan, moves toward it, and presses against the mince. She keeps pushing it until she comes out of the trance, and her hand gets severely burned. She cries with pain. Donald takes her to the hospital, and upon returning, he puts her straight to the bed. She needs support because of the difficulty of walking on her own. At night, Wendy is sleeping, and Donald sits beside her, worried for her. All of a sudden, she wakes up and starts crying. She complains about hearing strange sounds. Donald suggests going to the hospital, but Wendy keeps crying and complaining about bizarre noises. He calms her down by saying that she just has a high fever. She keeps insisting, and suddenly, she sees something behind Donald. She is frightened to the point where she can't even explain what she just saw. She is looking at something that terrifies her. Donald feels worried and hesitantly turns around. He fears finding something behind him, but as he turns around, he finds nothing. The next day, Johnny sets her camera at a place where 3 women had been murdered. She is making a video for her channel and is trying to capture some demonic activity. With the help of her electromagnetic reader, the interrogation starts. She walks around, asking questions and waiting for the reading on her device. Suddenly, The device starts to beep. She asks if she is bothering the ghost and wants her to leave. The device, surprisingly, starts to beep again. She leaves the place. Little does she know that something weird awaits her back home. She decides to visit Wendy and Donald. She rings the bell and waits for them to answer. She knocks on the door, but nobody answers. Much to her surprise, she finds the door unlocked. She enters the home and calls Donald. Donald receives a call from Jami. She tries to say something, but Donald can't understand a thing she's saying. He talks to her and immediately leaves for home. As he reaches his home, the sight of Wendy screaming behind the window welcomes him. He runs inside the house and finds Jami there too. Wendy is not looking at them and keeps screaming at something. She is having difficulty breathing and keeps looking outside the window. Donald calls her, and she calms down a little. Donald asks Jami what had happened earlier. She is as blank as him and tells her that Wendy kept saying endless cruelties. Then Wendy starts screaming out, "It will never end." Jami asks about the situation, but Donald is clueless. Later, Jami finds that same book and tells Donald that she knows about the book. She informs Donald that the rituals in the book are performed by a group of people. A group is stronger than an individual, and the rituals should never be executed alone. She believes that this is the reason why Wendy is sick. She shows Donald 3 signs written in the book. Each represents hearing, speaking, and seeing. These 3 symbols represent 3 senses, which will be divided among 3 people to banish the demon that is scaring Wendy. She informs him that they're supposed to fight together as a group. She tells him that she believes the previous owners might also be fighting against these demons. Furthermore, she also believes the book mentions some incantations to banish the demon, but doesn't find any as the book is blank. Donald finds all this nonsense. Jami tells him that the instructions are mentioned. Donald asks her if she believes in all this, to which she replies favorably. His ignorance toward the matter annoys her, but she still doesn't say anything. Donald, Jami, and Charlie must perform the ritual to save Wendy. This idea seems crazy to Donald, who snatches the book away from Jami and leaves. Jami has called Charlie into the house, too. Charlie wants to see Wendy and goes to her. Jami has something else in her mind. She steals the book, and while Charlie and Donald are talking to each other, she starts the ritual on her own. She starts to read the incantations. Nothing happens at first, but suddenly, the lights start to blink. Nancy visits Wendy, but the rest don't let her see Wendy. They ask Nancy to leave. Nancy is puzzled because of their unusual behavior, but doesn't say anything. She turns around to leave and opens the door. But before she could, the door closed on its own. Charlie, Donald, and Nancy look at each other with confusion. Charlie and Donald try to open the door, but at no avail. Suddenly, the lights in the hallway shatter. As they try to turn on their phones' flashlights, they realize their phone's batteries are empty. Nancy feels surprised as she had charged her phone before leaving her house. Donald leaves the room to check the electricity switchboard. Charlie and Nancy go to the back door, but as they go there, they realize that they are unable to open the back door too. Charlie turns around with frustration when he discovers someone standing in the basement. He calls the unknown identity out, but to no response. Due to the darkness, he can't figure out who the person is. Donald returns, and Charlie tries to look at the person, but no one is there anymore. He asks Donald if someone else is in the house, to which he replies in the negative. They all return to the hallway when Jami approaches them. She informs them about the misfortune she brought to everyone. Donald gets furious and scolds her as he has forbidden her. Charlie inquires about the situation. They show him the diary they had found earlier and claim that the incantations are for defeating the demon which is causing Wendy pain. Charlie finds it as a joke and laughs about it. When Donald opens the book to show it to Charlie, he sees something written on it that was previously not there. He flips the pages with utter confusion as the book is scribbled with different incantations written in Latin. Strangely, he can understand every word without any struggle, although he doesn't understand Latin. However, the book still appears blank to the rest of them. Jami declares that Donald will be the one who will talk to the demon, which leaves Charlie and Jami, who will see and hear the demon. They are still discussing it when suddenly the phone rings. They all turn around and discover the broken phone ringing on the table. They cautiously walk toward it, and Jami picks it up. Jami is a bit terrified, but no one speaks from the other side. She puts the phone back. They all start to look for a flashlight, and Charlie finds one. Jami stands alone when Donald approaches him and asks if she is fine. She replies that she has this feeling of being watched. Donald looks around but says nothing. She feels like something is nearby. She looks around and suddenly stares at a point. She is seeing something that Donald can't. They are still discussing when the phone rings again. This time, Charlie picks up the phone. An ear-piercing sharp noise hits his eardrum, and he puts it back. He is breathless and trembling in fear. At the same instant, a deafening bang from the kitchen makes everyone terrified. As they all approach the kitchen, only Charlie can hear the sounds of laughter, while others can't. Suddenly, they realize that Jami is not with them. She is staring at something that others can't see. There's a symbol on the wall, which is the same one Wendy drew earlier. Suddenly, Charlie hears something, so he decides to look for it. He takes the flashlight and follows the sounds. The sound is coming from the basement beside the kitchen. He flashes the light on the stairs and starts to go into the basement. The floorboard creaks as he advances. Someone is standing before him, covered in a sheet. He vigilantly moves further and removes the sheet. Luckily, it is just a dummy. He covers it back. At this point, he is completely terrified. He keeps hearing sounds. He flashes light everywhere violently, but can't find anything. He then finds another figure covered under sheets coming from behind him. He flashes the torch and finds someone's picture inside a box near him. Suddenly, he sees blood dripping. He stands up and looks up at the same moment. The box's lid closes with a loud bang, and the strange sounds start again. He is suffering from extreme pain because of the noises, and he's unable to stand properly. He covers his ears as the sounds are deafening. Apparently, he's having a seizure. Suddenly, the covered figure behind him starts to approach him, but he is in severe pain and doesn't notice it. Charlie starts shaking, throws up, and runs upstairs. He finds a bottle of whiskey, and he drinks it quickly. Donald and Jami come toward him and ask him what happened. Before he can say anything, he hears sounds coming from upstairs. He tells them that there is someone upstairs. They all run upstairs to check. Jami stops them as she can see someone at some distance from them. Suddenly, the lights turn off. Jami starts crying as she can see something horrific there. Charlie agrees with her as he can hear whatever is standing there. Donald asks her to describe the creature. She says that the unknown identity is a thin, long man and almost feels like a shadow. Meanwhile, Donald keeps looking in the book to find something related to the demon. Suddenly, the book slips from his hand like someone has pushed it away. He quickly goes inside the room to pick it up. The rest stay behind. As he picks up, the door closes behind him and nobody can open it. They all feel terrified. Charlie tells her that he can hear the demon and asks Jami to look at what it is doing. It is all black, and it is pointing at them. The sounds are so loud that Charlie feels the same pain again and has to hold his head to alleviate the pain. The demon pulls Jami towards it and takes her inside another room. Charlie keeps trying to open the door, but he can't. Suddenly, Charlie also gets locked inside a room. Nancy tells him that she is bringing something to help him. She runs downstairs and gets a dagger, but as she starts to climb the stairs, some force pulls her back and she falls to the ground. The same force holds her against the floor and forces her to stab. Meanwhile, Charlie is trying to open the door. He finds a drill, plugs it, and starts to drill open the door. Before he could have done anything, the same force holds him against the wall, and he drills. He lets out a scream as the blood paints his white shirt red. Jami gets locked inside a room and can see the same warning sign on the mirror. As she turns around, she finds Wendy missing from her bed. Jami cautiously looks under the bed and opens the closet door to search for Wendy, but she is standing behind her. Wendy grabs Jami and slams her against the bed. Donald cuts his in another room and rubs his hand against the book. Suddenly, his door opens up. He quickly goes out and approaches Charlie. Charlie is screaming with pain as his arm is bleeding. They can hear Nancy from downstairs. Donald comes to her and takes the dagger off. Charlie opens Jami's door and finds her sitting strangely on the bed. As he comes to her, she seems terrified. They all finally gather around a table to start the incantations. In a strange turn of events, Jami stands up and screams as she attacks Donald from behind. She keeps stabbing him. Nancy grabs Donald and takes him out of the room. Donald drags himself toward the stairs and starts climbing. Jami starts climbing after Donald. He tries his best to move away from Jami. He keeps rubbing his blood on the book when Jami starts stabbing him again. Donald finally faints and falls to the ground. Charlie comes out of hiding. He carefully looks around and runs toward Donald. He tells Charlie that he is going to need all the blood from Donald's body to stop everything. Suddenly, Jami wakes up, finds the bloody scene, and starts crying. After instructing them, Donald perishes. Charlie says that they have to start again. This time, Nancy has to read the book. Suddenly, the demon approaches them. Charlie starts to hear the same deafening sounds. The demon keeps coming toward them. Jami is instructing Nancy about when to start the incantations. As Nancy starts, the demon vanishes, and the lights return too. They all run upstairs to Wendy. Her fever is going down. They all feel relieved. As they all come downstairs, Nancy sees the book. She assumes the demonic power will leave once the demon is gone. Charlie and Jami look at her with confusion. She tells them that she can still see the writings in the book. As she reads the book, she finds out about twin demons. According to the book, some demons are in pairs and can only be distinguished based on high and low pitch sounds, and to remove both demons, they must also read the same incantation in reverse. And if they don't remove both demons, one of them will stay back among the living. Charlie falls against the wall as he believes he has heard both of the demons. Charlie runs upstairs to find Jami when he hears her screaming. As he returns, he finds Jami stabbing Nancy. Charlie yells at her, and the door behind him slams shut. Later on, Wendy wakes up and looks around in confusion. She smiles when she finds Jami sitting in front of her, with the book beside her, indicating that the demon has taken control.